Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Raise.dev Hacktoberfest Help Desk. My name is Joe, and I'm your host for this edition. If you are new to the show, welcome to the Hacktoberfest Help Desk. Our aim, as you kind of says in the tin, is to help you land your contributions this Hacktoberfest, whether that means answering your questions directly and helping you get unstuck, or walking through adjacent topics and showing you some cool projects. And that's exactly what we're doing today on this show with our special guest, who I will introduce very shortly. But before that, if you're returning to the show, welcome back. Hope you're having a great day. How does this show work? What are we going to be doing? So today we've got a special guest who's going to be walking us through a project. It's a TypeScript GraphQL project. And we're going to be looking at that project and how you can contribute to that project, how you can use that project. And very excitingly, I believe we're going to be getting into a pull request and kind of seeing how a maintainer works through pull requests and decides how to merge it and what advice to give you on that pull request. That's super cool. We are live 3 times a day, every day in October, with a wide range of amazing guests. You can find our schedule kept up to date at twitch.tv RaiseDev's schedule. It is updated on a week-by-week basis. So at the moment, it's a schedule for this week. So you can ignore everything up until this time on Friday on that schedule. This is our second from last show of the week. The next show is at 10 p.m. CEST, 4 p.m. Eastern US time. And that's with Chris Hunt and our founder, John Britton. They'll be diving into some old Ruby code. I'll talk about the shows we've got on next week at the end of this show. But in the meantime, if you want to submit a question to the Raise.dev Hacktoberfest Help Desk, you're stuck on Hacktoberfest, you don't know where to start, you've got an issue you can't solve, anything like that, you can submit those questions to raise.dev/Hacktoberfest. A couple of notes, administrative notes about the chat. You're very welcome to post in chat. Please post your questions. Please talk to us as we go. We will do our best to answer as we go along. But also, please be mindful that we do have a moderation bot running, and the internet is a big and scary place. So if you post a URL in the moderation bot without first checking in with us, it will time you out for 5 seconds. So please drop us a message. You can @RaiseDevs in the Twitch chat and just say, I want to post a link, or I've got this project that I'm working on that's relevant to what you're discussing, anything like that. And I will then permit you to post links for a minute so that you don't get banned. Earlier, we had some of the viewers competing about who could get the longest timeout from our mod bot. That's not encouraged. I had to unban someone because they got themselves timed out for 10 minutes. Please don't make me have to do that this time around. So that's, I think, all of the administravia. So all that leaves me to... Oh, I'm lying to you entirely. The final thing, who are Raise.dev? Why are we doing this? Raise.dev, we are a service to help you level up in your career, whether it's your first job, your second job, or you're trying a career change, anything like that. We help you get the experience you need to make that jump in your career with the help of our expert coaches. So you can go to raise.dev and sign up today. We're entirely free whilst you're in early access. And you can get matched with one of our lovely coaches who will help you get where you need to be in your developer career. So now that's finally all from me. Let me introduce our lovely guest. Welcome to the stage, Enda Phelan. How you doing? Enda Phelan. I did it the wrong way around. Enda Phelan. Very sorry.
I was going to let it pass. It's okay.
It's like now it's in my head where we discussed it, and so I had the wrong one. I was like, it's not that one. Anyway, sorry. Enda Phelan. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
So glad to have you here. Do you want to introduce yourself to the viewers?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, as Joe said, my name is Enda Phelan. I'm one of the developers, maintainers of Graphback, the lead developer. We are in the Airgear organization on GitHub. We're an upstream community that is funded, backed by Red Hat. So
that's awesome.
Graphback, yeah. So Graphback is primarily it's a toolkit, really. It's whatever you want it to be.
Right.
But what the main thing about it is you can create a GraphQL application
right,
with very little knowledge. I wouldn't say very little knowledge,
right,
but you can create your data model, and with a few clicks you can start a server. But Graphback will bootstrap your existing API with a CRUD layer on top.
Fantastic.
So makes it very easy to get into GraphQL, very easy to start with Graphback, and very easy to start building your applications, full stack applications in Node.js.
Right.
So that's what I've been doing for the last just over a year now in Red Hat.
Cool. So you get to work on this project as your day job at Red Hat.
As my day job, yeah. It's really fun, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's we're really community focused.
Right.
We really encourage community contributions.
Mm-hmm.
We're very open. We have a Discord channel where we actively engage with our community.
Right.
And on top of that, we have, it's also used within Red Hat as well. The upstream
Right.
project is used within Red Hat.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, but yeah, that's kind of sorry.
Cool.
So that's what I'm doing at the minute,
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I did work on a couple of different projects in Red Hat before this.
Nice. How long have you been at Red Hat?
It's actually, it'll be the 31st of October. It'll be 2 years. So I remember.
Yeah.
I remember the first day I joined. It was the very last day of Hacktoberfest.
Nice.
So I was like, I missed out on getting any contributions this year.
Right.
It just joined at the end.
That's so funny. So yeah, I guess we'll get into. There's a couple of things we're going to touch on today. So we're going to talk a little bit about your open source journey, about Graphback in particular. I think we've touched on GraphQL a little bit in this show before, but I think some of our viewers may be newer to GraphQL, haven't heard of it before. So I'd love to kind of get your take on where GraphQL.
I'll take a step back on that. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So I think best place to start. Let's do a little bit of a dive out. Given this is Hacktoberfest and is how many people come to open source. What was your open source journey? How did you come to be working on, I guess, this project, but also more widely open source software as a day job, which is something so many people aspire to do?
I know, right? It is a dream job. I remember, I think the first year of Hacktoberfest was 2016. I can't really remember now.
They say it's 7 years old now, so probably a little bit older than that,
I think that's probably the first year I remember being in it. But I finished university in 2016. So I would have been in my first job back then.
Right.
And myself and my colleagues were discussing it, like if this Hacktoberfest, it looks pretty cool.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, this looks great. And I wanted to try and get into it,
Right.
But my experience at the time, it was really difficult. It was just a lack of experience,
Right.
It wasn't that it was hard. It's just that the software that I was working on at the time was very closed source. And then I remember looking on GitHub at some projects and doing your good first issue search terms and trying to contribute to things, but really, like, I could be looking at this project that I've never seen before, and I could start. I would try to contribute, but like you in a way you kind of need to know the project or you need to know the ecosystem,
right?
To be really good at it.
Yeah, that's definitely something we come back to a lot with, like, knowing the project, where it's like you can't just rock up to a project you've never used before and know what they need, right? Like,
no. So that was my biggest struggle because as I said, the projects I was working on in my company were kind of very far away from that. So I remember that first year being I didn't get any contributions at all, sadly.
Right.
So but the year after that, I was not working on programming for a while, but when I came back to it, my next job then was Red Hat. And I seen the job description and I was like, this is one of my ways in, because and I was so excited when I started. Before I get into that, when I say I wasn't contributing to open source, I wasn't contributing to projects that existed out there already. But like, another way you can do it is your own. I had my own side projects on GitHub, mainly used by myself. But that was my only kind of
used I guess pop. I don't know what the word is. Like a project that's not yours that other people are involved with, I guess.
Yeah. Like, that was my only area on GitHub or in that space with my own little projects, which may or may not have been used by anyone, but it was just fun. But coming to contributing to other ones, I don't think I had any. But then, of course, I got into Red Hat, and as you said, like, that is the aspiration of so many, to be doing open source contributions as your day job, and being able to making an impact upstream with open source projects that really anyone can use. They're up there for anyone to see.
Right.
So I worked on a couple of projects before this, and they were a little bit less upstream open source. They were on GitHub, but when I got into Graphback, This is a very community focused project. Like we have, as I said, we got our Discord and we got everything else there. And I just found myself in this whole new space that I've never seen, that I had never seen before. And now, like, I can think of, I'm working on Graphback every day, but I can think of dozens of projects that if I had the time, I could be making meaningful contributions to. And that's because, as I mentioned earlier, well, sorry.
All good.
Yeah, all good. You need kind of if you get to know one project really well on open source, that is an entryway into an entire ecosystem or environment of other projects. And I found this with Graphback. When I joined this team, I didn't actually know any Graphback at all. Sorry, GraphQL. So obviously with a bit of upscaling, and then Graphback works quite well with a lot of other GraphQL projects. We have our upstream and downstream dependencies, so we would depend on other projects in GraphQL, and we would integrate with other community projects too. We would actually collaborate with them and have some meetings every now and then to make sure we're all working towards this single vision of improving the entire GraphQL ecosystem.
Because I guess it's like, I mean, GraphQL is now in pretty wide use in quite a number of companies, but like we're still not that far away from like, I guess, the point where it kind of became a thing, right? Like it's still pretty early in the GraphQL ecosystem's lifetime, and they're still kind of at a point where a lot of fundamental tooling is still to be built and is being built. So yeah, I like the idea that, well, I mean, I can very easily see how you would become part of that ecosystem and end up like working on those shared infrastructure pieces, I guess.
Yeah, the space is evolving really quickly, at least in the Node.js. Actually, I know that it's evolving in all languages, but of course, I'm in the Node.js space, so I know for a fact that there's so many tools being built every day and being worked on. So in a way, like I think it's actually, I don't know the actual number. I think it'll be 7 years old. So it kind of is still young. But so
does that include like its time of like internal use in Facebook?
That's a good question. I don't know where I got the number from. I think that's roughly right. Like GitHub was one of the big first public users of GraphQL, and that was only like within 3 or 4 years. And I imagine that they were an early adopter, and that it can't have been too long before that. So 7 years sounds about on the number to me, I would say. But either way, like I know there's dozens of tools in Node.js that are working towards building an amazing ecosystem. From you got code generation, you got API servers, you got like database migration libraries that would use your schema. It's really, really cool to watch, So as I said, like that is how all of a sudden I'm in this place where I could be, if I had the time, I could be easily contributing to so many different GraphQL projects, mainly GraphQL, because Graphback has given me kind of the knowledge or the, by using Graphback, I can see this project I depend on has that could be fixed, or this could be improved. So like, I would say for anyone out there who wants to get into open source, because as I said, like at back a few years when I was trying to get in, I was just going in blindly looking for a project thinking, oh, this would be easy. But I think that the best thing is to like find one project that you really enjoy to use, and get to know it. And from there, like you can be into this space where there are multiple projects that you can be contributing to. So yeah, that would be my tip to anyone.
I think that's a super relevant and very useful tip.
But at the same time,
go ahead.
I'm just gonna. At the same time, I have a bit of an advantage in that I'm doing it as my day job. So I would say it's easy.
Yeah, for sure. But I think those I mean, it's not a linear path. There's definitely people who like break into open source who it takes them a long time for it to become part of their day job. But like, if it is increasingly a possibility with like big corporate open source and increasingly like companies realizing that they need to contribute back to the projects that they use internally. That like, I think it's easier today than it's been for a long time. And of course, there are also things like GitHub sponsors where you can get sponsored for your projects. And
that's what I was going to say next. Yeah, like back in 2016.
Yeah.
Maybe knowing what I know now, but there was less projects and there was less of a network. But like even the concept of raised devs, do you think it would have been possible back then? It would have been, you know.
Yeah, it's like I think raised devs like this is like such a product of like, I don't want to say we're post boot camp, but you know what I mean. Like, there was like definitely like 2016ish was like, oh, suddenly everything is a boot camp. There's a million boot camps, and like I think we're definitely there's a certain we're definitely of a certain time period.
Yeah.
So let's take that higher level view, I guess, and start from the start, which is like Graphback is a out of the box GraphQL server and client. What is GraphQL? Like, what is useful about GraphQL?
So you typically the traditional, I would say it's the traditional way now of building an API would be you know, REST.
Yeah.
But with GraphQL, basically you would have a schema, and your schema would describe your types. So just think of it like a database structure. You know, you might have a user type, you might have a message type, and they would have fields that would describe the attributes like a database table. And that is the contract that would define how your server. So like if they don't exist on your schema, then like they don't exist in your GraphQL server.
Right.
So like if you look at a REST API, you would have you might or you might not, but you would have a class, a user class, and that would be represent your database table. You have your routes, your / user / ID, and your controllers, but they're all very detached, disjointed. But with a GraphQL schema, it's all in one place, including your, I would say your routes, like in REST, but you have your query types, and that would describe the field, what data can go into them, your mutations, which are basically for creation and updates. Then you have subscriptions as well.
Right.
So yeah, you would have a schema file that would describe your API, and you can basically build your backend, your infrastructure behind that. So you have resolvers, which I would say the closest thing in REST to that would be like your MVC controllers.
Right. Yeah.
And each field in your type in your schema would have a resolver of some sort. So like you would have a name, a user.name, and that would have a resolver. You don't have to write a resolver for each one. It would just use a default, but you can override that. So it's the same concept with the query fields. So like you have a type query and get user, and you would build a resolver function that backs that field. So yeah, that's essentially how it works. And then I know in REST you would have multiple URLs, like it's your entry points to your data is through URLs. But with GraphQL, there's a single URL, which is, well, actually it can be whatever you want it to be, but that URL routes through your schema. So it's a completely way. It's quite, looking at it first, it can be kind of jarring if you're coming from REST. But like the benefits of when you actually use it, like using it is a breeze, but it's quite it's quite different.
That URL point's a good one. So I guess like a kind of repercussion of the schema and the way that works versus like, you know, the REST endpoints is like, if you want, say for example, we're talking like we're on GitHub and you want to get someone's GitHub issues, you first of all like call the API and get their GitHub like with their ID or their username to get like their profile, and then you traverse the API from there to get their list of issues. And that's like each piece of data is a new request to a new endpoint, right? Whereas like with GraphQL, you can build that query and do it in one request. Is that correct?
In one go, yeah, exactly. So that's a good point. So you have your schema, which is in the graphical schema language. But you would also build your queries in a similar fashion. You would build out your user object which would be your type, and you would also build out your fields, which could be nested because you would have relationships. So you can build that all in a single request, and that would be sent to your API server, and your schema would then, or your resolvers would then resolve that and return it. So yeah, like you could in theory fetch all of the data you wanted in a single GraphQL query.
Right. Which, like, aside from what I
cool.
imagine being, I imagine there's performance implications to this, but to me, like, one of the big things is like, if you're not making as many requests, that's just like so many fewer possibilities for failure. Like, I'm not waiting for 20 requests to return and building promises around all those requests before I can build the next request. It's just all one query, all in one go, which sounds like a wonderful simplification of everything I've ever written.
It really is. Yeah, it's really cool, fun to work with.
Awesome. So the other big thing about Graphback, which caught my eye when you first sent me this project, was that it's both like the server and the client. So I guess one of the things that I've done a little bit of GraphQL because, like, working at GitHub, they were big into GraphQL. But with REST, it's like you have a web server or some web framework that exposes a web server, and like you throw a path up and you put JSON behind that path, right? Like it's very clear how that API is built. The relationship in GraphQL, like what the components are, and I guess like what the services are and how they interact with the API, it's always been a little foggy to me. So like, when you say GraphQL server and GraphQL client, like what are we talking about?
That's good. Well, we don't have a GraphQL client as such. We generate a lot of the components, the GraphQL documents. So you would have as I mentioned earlier, you can do a GraphQL query from your client. And that would also go through the GraphQL schema language. You wouldn't like you wouldn't really typically create. You would never actually create a GET or a POST request to send it. I think you could in theory, but like it kind of defeats the purpose. But you have a GraphQL documents, which are your queries, which are built in the same language as your schema.
Right.
And there can be a lot of boilerplate in that if you're writing it by yourself. So what Graphback does is it can generate all of those from your schema, because the beauty of it is like both your client and your API, they both are bound to the GraphQL schema as a contract, as a, this is how your
like
system,
a specification, I guess.
That's a good think of a GraphQL API is kind of like an Open API REST specification in a way. So we will generate all of those files for you. Output them, and they're because they're in the GraphQL schema language, like you can consume them in React or Angular, or I'd say even Java and other languages too. So yeah, we just output those files for you, and you can then integrate those with your tools and your client.
Nice, awesome. We've got a question from GraphQL Cat, which seems like a very appropriate viewer to this channel. Thank you for dropping by, GraphQL Cat. He said, does Graphback work with GraphQL code generator, which I assume is another project in the ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we do like very easily. Yeah, like it can actually work with any code generator, but GraphQL code generator is one of the tools that we would actually. We have templates. We have a CLI that would generate all of this for you, and by default we use GraphQL code generator with that. So just for our listener, people who might not know what GraphQL code generator is, because we have you have a GraphQL schema and your documents. Why do you need code? So basically, if you have a React front end, React hooks.
Yes, well, I mean, I'm terrible at React, so only vaguely, but I'm aware they are a thing that recently happened. So,
I won't even go into hooks specifically, but you have your client documents in your React application, and GraphQL code generator will generate your strongly typed interfaces, types, hooks, React components, and everything that would match your GraphQL documents. So you don't have to use the raw documents. If you're in React, you can you can use the React hook that is generated from GraphQL code generator. That React hook would use your GraphQL documents, which Graphback uses or Graphback generates. So yeah, instead of having to, and on top of that, you have like a completely strongly typed TypeScript interfaces for all of your GraphQL types that Graphback generates. So yeah, it makes everything strongly typed and really easy to use.
Super cool. Nice. Well, I hope that answers your question, GraphQL Cat. So I think that's a good kind of explaining what GraphQL is and why it's used from the top level. Should we jump into Graphback?
Yeah, that sounds good. I will share my screen now.
Get your screen set up. And just a reminder while we're doing that, as we saw from GraphQL Cat, if you have any questions, you can throw them in the chat. We're happy to answer them as we go along. What we're going to be doing now is jumping into the Graphback, and I believe at some point today we're going to get to a pull request. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
I'm very excited. This will be the first time we've done this on the show.
Oh, nice. No pressure.
No, is that ready to go?
Sorry?
Oh, all good. I was checking the screen was ready to go. There we go.
Yeah. Where will I start? I can go to the Graphback website first.
Yeah, let's go with that.
I suppose. So all of our documentation, like if you look at our README, it's kind of bare because we point people to graphback.dev just to have everything in one place. But like it's really thorough. We have, I'll just go to master unreleased. We have our entire Graphback documentation built out here from how you can start using your application if you want. So I'll just take a little step back. We typically, we have our own CLI, but it's really, there's another library called GraphQL CLI. And that is actually developed by the same guys who create GraphQL code generator.
Right.
And we work closely with those. And we are used in the GraphQL CLI. Graphback is as a default extension, you could say.
Okay.
So with GraphQL CLI, you can generate your GraphQL server through the CLI. You can create your initial application, and then you have CodeGen here, which would generate your typings, which is GraphQL code generator. Then you have your generate command. That uses Graphback to generate your client documents and your whatever else you might be using. Also your schema.
Right.
So that was just to set some context because Graphback is actually used as the bootstrap within that and the generator.
Nice.
So we have our own CLI, so you might see that mentioned in here, but typically we recommend people to use the GraphQL CLI,
That makes sense.
Yeah, so you can create a new application with our CLI, or you can add it to an existing project. As I mentioned, we do some code generation, but I'd say our main area is our runtime. We generate all of the components that you need at runtime, and you pretty much, we give you the components and you can choose what you want to do with them. So in theory, we can work with, there's multiple GraphQL frameworks out there, like Apollo, Fastify, there's a few more, but they all use the same GraphQL.js reference implementation. And we would use that. We generate all our components using that. But so in theory, Graphback can be used with any of those.
Right.
So yeah, I will just skip down a little bit. I think what's best to do is I can show you how it works using the GraphQL CLI. You can see my screen okay, yeah?
Yes, that's good, looking good for me. If anyone in the chat's having issues seeing, let us know, but that looks great on my screen.
Good. Okay, so I'm going to use the GraphQL CLI to initialize a new application.
I've always you'll get there. I always love the little Node.js spinning indicator at the end that a lot of CLIs use nowadays.
The little forward slash.
Yeah. Like the forward slash that acts like a loading wheel.
Yeah, so I'm going to create a new application. This is my GraphQL project. I'll call it raise.dev. And you will get a list of templates that you can choose from.
Nice.
So you can use these templates they're a great way to get started. But if you have a GraphQL application already, you're not. Your Graphback is still for you. You can read our documentation and add it with our programmatic APIs in just a few, I won't say seconds. That's a bit, a few minutes, you know. So I'm going to choose a full stack React and Postgres template.
Oh, good emoji game as well. This is a good CLI.
Yeah, so I'll CD into this. So we have our template there ready to go. I wouldn't say ready to go. We got to press type yarn, and this will install our dependencies. Once I'm actually gonna code that because it'll take a while, and I can open the application while that's doing it. We talked about our schema earlier on.
Yeah.
So this is where you'll kind of see it, and it's just saying it is kind of hard to visualize, but
yeah.
We have what we call a data model.
Mm-hmm.
Now this is using the GraphQL schema language,
right?
But I wouldn't say this is the schema for in this. Maybe I'm confusing people. You will write your initial data models using the data model.graphql. Now that you can change that, you can call it whatever you want. You can have multiple files. You would write how you want your data structure to look like. So you have a node type, comment type. They will map to a database table for each.
Right.
And when you press start, Graphback will process that schema and add a load of extra information to this so that you can see that we have a typed query here.
We're being asked by the chat to zoom in on this file.
Thanks for that.
Thanks, GraphQL Cat. Cool.
Yeah, we zoomed in the terminal, but we forgot about this one.
Yeah. So sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. So you have your initial data model, but as you can see, we have a single query type here, but that's not very useful. So Graphback will take your data model file, process it, and for each of your types in your schema, it will generate a CRUD interface basically. So you have immediately you have access to create, read, update, delete, without having to write any code. And you add a new type, run it again, it will do the same for that. So as you can see, it makes it really fast to start using your application. I'd say that is finished by now. So I will start this application. I know that there's no container actually, so I'm going to start Postgres container. All of the templates come with a Docker Compose file, so you don't have to use it, but it's a way of getting
a quick start if you need it there. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Very good. I'm gonna run. No, I just really I'm used to running.
It's cool. We're on live stream. Something's always going to go a little bit wrong.
No, nothing's wrong. No, I'm used to using this within our mono repository, which has the debug. I don't need it for this. Yarn develop. We have a package.json, which will have a few commands. Develop just means you can start the TypeScript file directly without having to compile it. So it's you get your immediate changes. So as we mentioned earlier, there's a single GraphQL, a single URL, and in this application, it's localhost/GraphQL. I'm going to go to the index.ts. So this part here, that is basically loading up your GraphQL rc.yaml. This is GraphQL config, which is also built by the same team that built GraphQL code generator and GraphQL CLI. So we integrate very well with so many different GraphQL projects in Node.js. So you don't have to use this again, but it's a really nice way to configure your application. Yeah. And this here is CodeGen, which is GraphQL code generator, and I can actually show how that works shortly.
This one. So I'm trying to find GraphQL config to throw it in the chat. It's that one. Cool.
Sure it is. I'd say it is. So I'll go back to the index.ts. So so here's the main Graphback function that would build your Graphback API. Model.def is a reference to this data model file. and then data provider creator. So we use Connects, if anyone knows what that is. It's like it's a Postgres library, or sorry, it's a generic SQL library that will also work with Postgres. So our resolvers and our services use this.
Cool.
And finally, we also have a library which comes, I would say, you don't have to use it again. Like everything we do is optional. It's a really nice way
part of using a template is you also make opinionated choices on like what the fastest libraries to get started with, right? Like
exactly. So we have this library called GraphQL Migrations,
right?
And it will also use your model, your generated schema to migrate your database. So you will start off with, as you've seen, I just created a new Docker Compose file. This will take your schema. I'll open the schema file because we can actually see an example of how it looks when it's generated. So it will take your schema file and create a database schema to match that.
Right.
So you don't even have to create your database tables. This library will keep it
lovely.
it will keep it in sync with your schema, you know.
Nice.
So we have our comment and note types, which are our initial types, and like you can see, this file is 24 lines long. The generated schema is 173. So like we have our subscriptions, which are for subscriptions. You have new note, updated note, deleted note, for subscribing to those events.
Sure.
So the query, that's my custom one, but we have a get note for getting a single type, and find notes for getting, you can get all, or you can filter it using our filters. And then you have mutations, which are here, which is just, you got create, update, and delete for each of your types.
Right.
So yeah, that is the index.ts.
Nice.
So yeah, here's the next part. So Apollo server, it's probably the most popular GraphQL server framework in Node.js. I know there are, so all of our templates use this because of that, but you can simply just add your type defs to it and your resolvers, the generator resolvers here, and all of a sudden you're good to go. I will just show you here now. So this is
mash zoom in on this a little bit if possible.
I will do that.
Perfect.
So I'll get rid of that. So this is the GraphQL playground. Again, for anyone not familiar with GraphQL, they're probably, I'd say they're familiar with Postman. It's like the GraphQL.
Yeah.
So
you can make queries and send requests and see what comes back and those kind of things.
Yeah, you can do all of that in here.
Right.
And you can see again our schema, which is here.
Right.
You have our docs, then is our queries and our mutations and our subscriptions. You can go into those. You can see your type. You can see the filter. It just makes it's a nice way to read your schema.
Right.
So I have a note type, which I'm going to create right now.
Yeah.
Note description, and yeah, this is, like we were saying earlier, this is the GraphQL query language. You use the create note field, and then you can choose the fields that you want. Right. You can choose the fields that you want to return.
Yeah, which is where we get to like that kind of like bringing what would be multiple requests in REST into like one query, right? Like rather than these in REST, both those fields would be a separate endpoint that I'm hitting, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I know like Note has a relationship with comments. I know there are, because this is a brand new database.
Right.
There's obviously not going to be any comment in this, but we can still, if we want to try it and return it, we can. So please work. So you can see that there's always that. We have created a new note, and the structure of your returns payload matches exactly to that of what you tried to get back. Like the comment is empty because obviously there's no comments.
Yeah.
I'm gonna create a.
That's also actually really. Now I think about that, like that effectively, like again, to make the comparison with REST, that like to create a note in REST to be a post request, and you don't always necessarily know what you're getting back from a post.
Yeah.
Whereas this is like, I'm creating data and I know exactly what I want you to return to me on that, which is
exactly,
really cool. Yeah.
And also there's no if the API is built like well, there's no overfetching. So like Graphback like gets these fields and explicitly asks your database to not select these. So like if you don't do that, you can still fetch all fields, but we want to be performant as well, you know.
Which is a big problem with like some REST APIs where like they need to build in like pagination, for example, because if you hit an endpoint in a certain way, you end up retrieving like GitHub issues is a great example of this, where if you want to get issues from GitHub, they have to paginate the API because you get like an issue object on GitHub has like 100 fields or something, and you can't choose between those in REST. So if you want to get 50 issues, that's a lot of data that's being piped down. So that's super cool.
So I'm going to create a comment. I should have really filled this out earlier. Title, no, whatever. Description, whatever. So the ID of that is 1. So I'm going to note ID 1, and then I would choose again text, description, note. Yeah, so you can see here it's not note, it's not note ID you want to return, it's note. So I would be able to fetch back your note type here. I'll just actually leave out a couple of fields to show that you know, not.
This might be a really silly question. Is there a particular reason why the ID begins with an underscore?
No. Well, the templates, we have all of our templates in there.
Right.
And some use MongoDB, which uses underscore ID. So we just wanted to have a common data model for all those. But you can use whatever you want, really.
So it's kind of like informally indicating primary key, I guess. But
you can call it whatever you want. So I'm gonna create this comment, and you can see that it's also return note ID. It's return the note object. So that's your creations. Query. Will return notes. Sorry, items. ID, title. The comments. I'm going to create a few comments on that.
Cool.
So that's okay. Just don't have that. So you can get all of your data at once. So it makes it really, really powerful and really quick to start building your applications. I'd say I find it hard to go back to REST. I used to do REST a lot and haven't done it so long. It's gonna be unfamiliar to me if I try doing it again. Why doesn't this work like this? So that's your basic filter, your basic requests. But I'll just show you GraphQL CRUD.
Okay.
Have you heard of OpenCRUD?
I actually haven't. Which?
Okay. Yeah, it's not used anymore.
Right. Okay.
I think it was a Prisma. I think it was Prisma. They created they created a specification, but I think it was abandoned. It was a CRUD specification for GraphQL as a kind of a common CRUD standard for companies if they wanted to adopt the code, and it would it would really aid integration and interoperability across different platforms.
Cool.
But it was abandoned, and I don't really think anyone uses it anymore. So we decided to build GraphQL CRUD, which is a similar concept, but we have our own filtering mechanisms and different query, and I can show you it basically. So docs. So
cool. Okay.
You can in REST you might have to build 10 resolver or 10 controllers if you wanted to return notes in 10 different ways. Unless you build some complex filtering in your in your REST URL, you don't really want that. But with GraphQL, it's one endpoint, everything's sent to one payload. So it's really easy to built-in filtering into your single request.
Right. Okay.
So within this find nodes, you can choose to get all of your data.
Yeah.
And like that, we have a filter which I can choose to get the ID. There's not going to be a huge variation of data, so I can't really show you too much of a variation, but I want to get all nodes where, greater than.
Yeah. So you can do like ordering within a filter. That's super cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
you would use this, say in your application, you had a way of like creating and reading your notes, and then you had a list view where you could sort and filter. You could sort notes via the UI. Like you could build those requests from using these filters.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That has to be extremely interesting. Okay. Very cool. Huh.
I was thinking it wasn't working. I was like trying to figure out why there was none greater than ID1, but there's not. Right. I need to be doing find comments. So find comments ID greater than 2. No, that's cannot query field title on type comment. That's okay. That just doesn't exist.
Yeah, just cut that one out. Kind of comments.
This payload is wrong. I'm still using the note payload.
Right.
So ID. I'm going to do note. Okay. Items. Note. ID. So you can see that within this single find comments query, you can get you can get completely different sets of data by this filter input.
That's super cool.
So we have all IDs that are greater than 3. It goes much more complex than that. Like we have I can show you one of the filter inputs as an example, like for string. So you can do not equals, less than equals, less than, greater than equals, greater than, in, contains, etc.
Which I imagine must help with like having quite performant front ends, right? Because you don't have to get the whole list of things and then decide what you're going to show or do with that data, like where you're displaying it. You just have the server do all of that.
Exactly, yeah. And you would define these filters from your client.
Right.
So like I wouldn't say you don't need just these few, but you can drastically reduce the number of queries and mutations that you need to work with.
Right.
So yeah, for a lot of the use cases, these are all you need. So you have also ordering. I have to remember how to order. Order by.
So sorry, someone's asking in chat what we're doing right now. So Enda has just built a Graphback project using the templates, and now we're kind of Enda's demonstrating some of the like basically playing around with CRUD, like create, read, update, delete via the GraphQL playground that's built into the application. So we're seeing some of like different features of GraphQL and how they can be used to make our life easier, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, exactly. So like for that listener watching in, we can do all of this, but you don't really need to write any of the code for it to happen. Where am I? All you had to write was this data model. This data model schema, and Graphback will pretty much bootstrap your server. It will generate all of those CRUD methods, CRUD fields for you to use. On top of that, we have so core Graphback. This comes out of the box, but you can also write your own plugins to extend your schema further if you want to. So we are able to automate. Just say, for example, you want every type in your schema to have a new field for whatever it might be. You want to add a version field or a last updated. You can write a plugin and add it here to our plugins array, whatever you want to call it. Start your server. That's added to your plugin like that. So that's the back end part of it. I can quickly show the the front end side of it, because we talked earlier about GraphQL code generator. So I'm first of all just going to make a change to my schema just as an example, because I never really showed that. New field. So I'm going to start my server again. Why is that so? Yeah. So that will have created that field in your database. And we can add it right away to your query or your mutation. So new field, it's there immediately. So that's all it takes, really, you know. Yeah. I'm going to show you the client side of things. So basically, we have a client that's included in the template. We have GraphQL. So graphback.graphql. It's the file that we generate. So you can generate your queries. You got your query get note, query find notes, and this is your client-side documents that you can then use in your React, Angular, whatever you want to use to perform these operations. So what was I going to do? Yeah, I want to go into client, and I think I may need to. Let's see. So that's okay. So I'm going to do yarn code gen. Okay, yarn GraphQL code gen. Okay. I think I need to do yarn and install the dependencies in the client folder.
No, it's all good. We need to. This is like the second time today when we've needed to have some fancy elevator music going. I've been asked by one of our viewers to say hi. Hi, Enda.
Hello.
They came in late and were very worried they'd missed everything. They came in from the Hacktoberfest Discord. Thank you for being here.
That is I can't pronounce his name, but this is one of our new community contributors.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, he's been doing really good. Like, we're really impressed, actually. We're chatting about it because he's been involved in a good few PRs. A lot of our Hacktoberfest labels are gone now because he's been closing them. There's been really good engagement in both our PRs, our issues, and in Discord. So hi back. Thanks.
That's nice. I'm so glad your community is showing up.
Yeah, like I know there's been a little bit of bad rep with Hacktoberfest just in the first couple of days or so.
They've fixed now.
I think it's fixed, yeah. But like, I think maybe because Graphback, it's slightly under the radar in that it has about 300 stars, but we didn't get any spam posts at all.
That's awesome.
We got like the contributions that we got were actually really useful. Some were related to the Hacktoberfest labels we had,
right?
And we got other ones that we didn't know. Well, we didn't know. We knew we needed, but there's one example, like someone added into the TS config a source map config, one line that like changed everything for us because it just made working in VS Code much easier.
That's awesome.
You know, so yeah, we're really happy with it so far.
It's like a great example of like important and influential contributions that aren't necessarily like core code to the app, right? Like, it's like infrastructure stuff is super useful. That's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, this better work. Code then. Okay.
Hey, there we go.
I wasn't sure if I had a shortcut in the package.json file or not. So generated types.tsx is the client side GraphQL code generator. So you can see like this is a huge file. This is massive file. And this is all of your typings that are generated from the schema and from the queries.
Right. Okay.
So I'm going to go to like, let's see, use, create, note mutation. So this is a React hook that is generated here. And this uses the Graphback created queries and mutations. So like GraphQL code generator, it doesn't necessarily need to have Graphback there. It just generates it for all of your queries and all of your types. But that is one very useful integration. Because if you look in components, notes, create note, it becomes as simple as use create note, which uses from generated types. This creates for you a create note function, which you can then use in your form. Send your variables through like this, and that sends it through the Graphback server to your database. So like in reality, the Graphback, as well as using GraphQL code generator, like this whole application, all of this stuff is generated, you know. As a user, I haven't really needed to write any custom database logic, resolvers, architecture, clients. Well, I wouldn't say you have to create your visual components, but a lot of the groundwork is done for you know. Just to have something there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, I think that is, I would say that's pretty much Graphback.
Perfect. Yeah, we're demoing that. That's super neat. And yeah, it's interesting how we've got the Rails fanboys doing the show this evening, and this is like the sort of stuff you showed me today is a lot of what like I hear from Rails fans in terms of like, you know, getting stuff up, getting CRUD apps up really quickly. And so it's been cool to see that happening in because like this is also, I guess, important to mention what this is. This was Apollo, this demo, right?
Yeah, Apollo.
Yeah, so it's cool to kind of see that speed to get going with like a framework that isn't necessarily built to do like the huge convention over configuration that Rails is, if that made any sense as a thought at all. Yeah, neat, cool, awesome. Thank you for demoing it. So I guess how we wanted to come around on this was talking about like getting involved with Graphback a little bit, and you actually said like a lot of your hacktivist issues have been claimed and cleaned up, but you did prepare a pull request that you were going to review for us, right? Which I'm very excited about. So part of the reason we wanted to do this is like we have had a lot of questions. Actually, the bulk of the questions we've had have been things like my PR has been marked invalid, or like it hasn't been accepted for this reason. And so I'm really excited to get kind of like your perspective as a maintainer on how you think about PRs and how you go about reviewing one, and what I guess like what people hopefully people can learn from you reviewing one.
So disclaimer: this is one of my own PRs, but I created it.
That still works.
Well, no, I have a couple of examples. This is one I created today that I would see as like a very, very, you know, a good example. Actually, it made me realize today that we didn't have a pull request template.
Right.
And I think it's something we should have had a while ago, just to make it even easier again for people to,
for sure,
to know what to write in your PRs. You know, just make things easier for everyone.
Yeah. I love pull request templates. It's like my favorite GitHub feature.
So yeah, didn't have one until today. So all of our community contributors from the last week or so, it's there now.
Nice.
Pull requests. So yeah, this is one that I created today, basically.
Right.
One thing I guess where you can start is before you even get to the pull request, you got to create your commits. And I'm not sure, like it's quite commonly used now, but it's not a standard by any means, and it never will be. But conventional commits, have you heard of these?
I haven't heard of this. I'm very interested in this. What is this?
So yeah, it's worth throwing in chat for everyone, or something later on. But it's a way of organizing your commit messages. It makes it neater. You can categorize them, and there's actually some tooling out there available that will then use that organization to like generate your change log, for example. So you can see like this commit message is fix. So that organizes that into, you know, it's categorized as a bug fix. Then the code gen schema is optional. You can put that in or you can leave it out, but that's like if you wanted to scope this commit message into something like a package or some area.
Yeah.
And then your commit messages comes after that. And there is a lot more to the conventional commit specification that you can do. You can add a line that says breaking to indicate that this is a breaking commit message. But that is, we use this for all of our commits. We have an npm hook that's built into our package.json. So when you can create a commit message, it will actually prevent you from doing it invalidly. So I think it makes it everyone aware that we do use this specification.
Oh no, I'm genuinely very excited about this. I just added someone in chat, Christoph, if you're watching, check this out. I think this solves a problem for us. Yeah, because we there's a project recently where we had a big conversation in the big issue thread about commit conventions, and it never went anywhere. So this is actually, thank you for telling me about this. This is great. So your contributor Arsh is asking, what goes in the parenthesis when using conventional commits? So in your pull request, you've got code gen schema in there.
That's a good question. We don't really have a very strict requirement into what goes into this. But if I just look in, I'll open Graphback. Looks like. So we have like a mono repository. Graphback is made up of multiple projects, multiple packages, sorry. And you have like, can I make that smaller? No. Create Graphback, Graphback CLI. There's, I think, I don't know how many there are exactly, but I tend to scope them by their package name, leaving out the Graphback prefix. So like if you wanted to create a commit into core, you just do fix brackets core. There's the one I wrote was, I don't know where it is now, but it's basically for the Graphback. Here it is, Graphback code gen schema, and that's what that is there. So that's what we don't, we don't have a strict requirement for. If you can add it in, that's great. But if you don't have one either, it's fine. And that's what we do, but like other companies might have a completely different requirement for them. So I recommend to look at, we don't have it in our contributing.md because we don't care that much about that. But check out a project's contributing file. They might ask you for a specific thing in there.
Right. Cool.
Yeah, that's the first thing that I would look at, because that's before you even get to the pull request itself,
Yeah.
After that, let's see. So I guess don't overload the pull request with anything. I know it's unavoidable sometimes. Like if you don't look through our history, because we have some big PRs there ourselves, and sometimes it's unavoidable. But try to keep it small.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I don't mean put everything onto one line to keep it small. Just keep the scope quite small. You can make a couple of separate PRs if you want to.
Yeah, this has definitely come up a couple of times in the context of especially during Hacktoberfest, if you're trying to make sure your PR is accepted, chunking up your pull requests. So each pull request deals with one thing, means that if one of those things is controversial, it doesn't hold up your entire contribution. So you can get to those 4 pull requests much quicker. And actually, the reason I was laughing was your username is fantastic.
Mine, you like it?
Yeah, it's very good.
Do you know what that means? Crack in Irish?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. People tend to like it. Yeah, people who understand, who are Irish or English, I
won't attempt to say it out loud. But yeah, no, it's very good.
Cool. The pull request size, no, you're okay. The pull request size, just try and keep it as small as it needs to be. Don't if you can think of other fixes that are involved, maybe put them into a separate PR. I know what's a really good example of this, and it's sometimes accidental, is you can be you could be fixing a couple of things and you want to push a PR, but your linter, your editor might format the whole file and indent everything. So when I go to, or anyone goes to look at that, it shows up as a green line for changed. But all you can see is you might see 100 lines changed because the whole file was indented, but you only really care about that one line that actually changes functionality, So try and avoid that, because it actually makes it hard to review, really hard to review. You can put that into a follow-up PR if you want to. So yeah, that is the main thing, because the smaller it is, the easier it is to review. The easier it is to find bugs. The larger it is, it's there's so much here. You kind of scan it a bit more, because it's really hard to focus on what's happening. So yeah, try and keep it small. That'd be the biggest takeaway I would have. I think I kind of mentioned as well, like the single responsibility is just keep it focused on one thing if you can. Sometimes it's unavoidable, and that's fine. Like
sometimes it's close coupling with other, like, and even sometimes you're like a thing that's nice about pull requests is like if a pull request is addressing those multiple issues, you can link them straight in the pull request just by like throwing in the issue number, right?
So you can see here you can do linked issue and add one yourself. Another thing I like to do, because it just puts it right into the description, is there are some closing keywords. If people search closing keywords GitHub, there's multiple. You can do closes.
Oh, actually, can you open that issue? They added a new thing on the issue side the other day, which is really nice. So if you open that issue and look under the title, it says "May be fixed by PR 2171," which is I haven't seen it appear up there before, but it's like it's really
I didn't see that one myself, but I know like when I often see it linked down here. And then another nice thing about that is when the PR is merged, it will close the issue as well. Yeah. So like it just means we don't forget about it, and things are tidied up quite nicely.
Yeah, but equally, if your PR doesn't close the issue, avoid using any of the closing keywords, because it can be very unexpected when that happens. So don't say fix if you don't want it to close the issue in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The description matters because, like, obviously, I won't say don't put more into it, because more isn't always helpful. And then if you have it linked to an issue, maybe you don't need that much at all. But like, the less information there, the harder it is for us to review, and we might leave it for a year. We can't get to it straight away, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So we only put this in today, but pull request template, like, it's something that I guess we should strive to have in, because it's not fair on contributors to come in and know what they need to put in,
what context you need, and
like every project is different. So hopefully this helps people. But yeah, we have a pull request template in here now. But even if you don't, I guess you can still add these things yourself into other projects. So we have what type of change it is, bug fix, new feature, break and change. Just, we don't. They're the three main ones, I think. And documentation. Awesome. Checklist. So even if they're not in the description, like, people should always check the contributing file, because projects have certain requirements before even doing a PR that you should check out. We don't really have any. Our contributing file is more for how to start developing a Graphback, how to build it, how to do all that. Lint and unit tests. So people often skip this part and they forget, but you should run your tests locally and make sure that everything works, because it'll be caught. We have a continuous integration, so that when you push your pull request, it will say your tests are failing or your linting is failing, but that just makes it slower for you. Because you could wait 10 minutes and see that, you could forget about it.
To a certain extent as well, it shows that, like, if you push code that's like obviously failing the standard test suite, it doesn't super show that you've been careful in your PR.
Yeah, it can probably show that maybe you haven't verified it yourself. Like, did you run this? It's good to run it in using one of the templates as well, or whatever the project does is. So I've added tests. So you don't always need to add tests, but depending on what's changed, but you might need to add tests if you add a new feature or you fix a new bug. Tests will need to be added to show that this works, And then, like documentation, again, not always a requirement, but it quite often is.
Very like neglected area in a lot of these pull requests.
Definitely for features, like if you make a feature change or something, I would say 95% need docs. But for bug fixes, maybe less so. But again, user discretion. And then verification, again, that depends. But like, just show us how you verified this yourself if you weren't using unit tests. So just a couple of steps to show us what to do. Because we could be working on other stuff, and we want to review your pull requests and we want to get your contribution in.
Right.
But this will just help us, you know.
Yeah. You don't have to read through all of the code to work out how to even go about using whatever they've added.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And then, yeah, that's the description. Have you? I'll send a link.
Yeah.
Have you ever read The Anatomy of a Perfect Pull Request?
I haven't. That sounds like the ideal resource for our viewers.
I've just sent it in. Oh, that's to you.
Cool.
You can send it in.
Oh, did you get banned? I didn't VIP.
Oh,
so you sent to me in private chat. Perfect. No, don't worry. Yeah. There we go.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good read.
Yeah.
I read it when I joined Red Hat first.
Right.
Just to get myself.
Yeah.
Knowing what to do, you know. But it's really good for everyone to read because it just shows you what. It kind of talks about what I mentioned there before, but it might go into a little bit more detail and actually has some research, like really interesting research. Ooh. So the larger, can't remember who, but it says it in it. But like the larger a pull request becomes, I think it introduces more bugs or something. A study of
a Cisco systems programming team revealed that a review of a 200 to 400 line of code PR took 60 to 90 minutes. Would yield 70 to 90% defects. Okay. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I can't believe there's research on that. That's awesome. Like, I'm going to throw the research in there as well. Very cool.
So yeah, that's something that I would recommend people read.
Yeah.
What else? I can go through the files chain in this, but like,
yeah, sure.
It has everything that we
kind of covered. Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. So like we have added some, like it's only very small, but there's documentation there.
Right. Yeah.
And then there are the file changes. So there's tests. It's one test. Like testing is a great way to verify your own work as well.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with how to do it. I often like to write the test first.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good way to just verify that your code works, and then it's done forever.
Right.
These are snapshots. I know some people have actually gotten caught out with snapshots before because they run the tests, but what is this? So a snapshot is like you have a test case that could. I'm just hearing some echo.
That weirdly enough has happened to me multiple times, despite the fact that I wear headphones and speakers. I wear headphones and use a microphone. Someone keeps getting that from me. Let me mute for a little bit while you explain.
Cool. Yeah. So a snapshot is let's say you take your test could write let me see. Yeah. So your schema. We have a Graphback generates a schema. And you could have a test that would take a snapshot of a schema in a particular time frame. And that would be checked the next time the test is run to see if the snapshot is the same as the time before. But if you make a change to your project that actually affects the schema and your tests run, it will compare the new snapshot to the one that exists here as a file and see that they don't match. So that's when the snapshot fails. So either something is wrong or you need to update your tests, your snapshots. So like, I just know that some people got caught out with that and they didn't fully understand what that is or what to do. Again, it depends on the testing framework, but we use Jest. So check out the Jest documentation on how to update snapshots, because that's one thing that we found that people struggle with a little bit.
Right. Yeah, funnily enough, Arsh is in the chat asking what snapshots are, and then after you answered, said confusing. So yeah, it's I imagine when you're contributing to that project, that's something that trips people up. I'm getting that link. There you go. That's the link you recommend, just for the snapshot testing.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's
awesome. So I guess do you still have any Hacktoberfest issues? So you were saying that you're running low. Is there still, if people was so inspired by this and wanted to jump into Graphback today, is there still anything up for grabs?
That's a good point.
We're going to show this, and Arsh is immediately going to run over there and grab them.
I know that we have some still up. We need to add more. We need to take some time because a lot of them are closed.
Yeah.
We have, that's a good one to take. That one's in progress by Rinky Yaded.
Oh, nice. We have one of the maintainers of Faster Fire coming on the show next week.
Oh, nice! Really cool.
Yeah, Ethan.
This one is also it's in progress. And then these. Yeah, we do need to actually add some more. We haven't really had time lately, but because it's actually great. We put up a Hacktoberfest label, and it's the same day somebody takes it.
That's awesome. That's great. So, yeah. Also, it's worth mentioning again. We do this reminder a lot. The issue does not have to have Hacktoberfest on it to be valid for Hacktoberfest. As long as the repo does or the pull request does, it's all good.
I actually created an issue today that I can add the Hacktoberfest label to it, but I said
it will call in the swarm if you do.
I left it in case people wanted to see like me downloading Graphback fresh and doing a pull request. I'm not sure if people wanted to see that or not, but I'll add Hacktoberfest to that.
If you want to go for it, you're very welcome. We've got about 10 minutes left, so it depends how ambitious you're feeling.
It might be a bit tight.
Cool. All right.
Yeah. I'll put the label on it, so that's up for grabs now.
Some folks have asked in the chat. So we've had a couple of questions about AWS in particular. So GraphQL Cat said, and they asked earlier what it's like to do an AWS migration, which I'm not entirely sure what that means in the context of Graphback, but they've just said now, add some issues to document Hasura AWS App Sync migration. Do you know what that means?
Yeah, so Hasura is a similar, they're both similar. AppSync and Hasura kind of do what Graphback does, but they're much bigger players, you know.
Right.
This person basically saying if somebody wants to migrate from those platforms, we should add some issues to document how to do that. Yeah. That's a good point. Maybe we can do that. I know AppSync is very similar to what we do. Even our GraphQL CRUD that you saw there, the schema is very similar. So migration in theory shouldn't be that difficult. But again, I haven't done that myself, but that's a good, they said something else there.
They're explaining to me because I was an idiot, but you got it. So I think you answered that already. Oh, they want to know how long it will take. Huh. I don't know. How long is the piece of string? It depends on what you build, I guess.
Yeah. I don't really know the answer to that right now, but we could create an issue there for
and if they wanted to continue if they wanted to chat to the team about doing that, I guess your Discord is going to be the best place to go, right?
Yes.
Cool. Let me find the link for that for them.
So if people want it again later on, it's on our
Yes, the website. There we go. Boom. You join the Discord, and that link was in the footer of the website, which is there. Rad.
You got it?
I've sent it. Just so a note. This is one of the fun things about using Discord for communities. I guess your Discord. Oh, what have I've just left the studio. What's happened here? I don't know what I've done. Sorry about that. I pressed the shortcut that closed the window. Your join Discord link has someone's display picture. So it's just like, I'm assuming it's a member of the team leaning back in a chair in what looks like a pub as the picture for the Aero Gear GraphQL Discord.
Yeah.
Amazing. Wicked, cool. So I think we ran through everything that we wanted to cover. Thank you so much. This has been I think we went for an incredible amount. So for those of you who joined in halfway through, we covered a little bit of how Enda kind of got into open source and ended up with that being your full-time job at Red Hat. We went through explaining GraphQL and how a little bit of why GraphQL is advantageous and comparing it to REST in various ways. Jumped into Graphback, saw all the magical auto-generating CRUD stuff. We've played around with some of that live with the playground, and then jumped into the project and saw a pull request and some of your best practices for pull requests. So this was a very dense session. Thank you so much.
No problem. I just thought of one thing as well that I should add. In pull requests, I sometimes see screenshots being added to it as a verification.
Right.
It can be. It's fine for me. I can read that, but some people who might be visually challenged can't actually read that.
Right.
So it's just a way of being inclusive to everyone. Just to try not to use screenshots unless you really need to. Try and use text.
Yeah,
it's just something I thought of there.
I guess if it's a front end thing, I guess like is where screenshots are most appropriate. But if you're showing screenshots of text, you may as well drag the text in, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I believe there's some Irish in the chat for you.
Yes. They're obviously very good. I can read it out. Gohíntak, Guramila Mahagat. That I think it means brilliant. Thanks a million. Now I'm under pressure. Fathers agam merkler show. I don't know what that means. Agam is me, and Guramahagut. Guramahagut. Damn. I've been found out.
Well, we've also covered Irish slang on the show with Crack as well, so we're truly a dense show. Okay, awesome. We are just about out of time, so thank you again so much for taking time out of your day to spend this with us. If folks want to chat with you, we've already covered the Discord. Where is there anywhere else they should go? I guess your Twitter handle.
For me directly, my Twitter handle would be the best place. But Discord is where we are most of the time. Yeah, that's it.
Wonderful, awesome, well, cool. Thank you so much. I will kick you backstage while I do the outro stuff. Farewell.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Alrighty, thank you again to Enda. That was awesome, and that definitely answers some of my questions that I've had about GraphQL for a long time. So I hope you all enjoyed that. I know we had a lot of people who came in like halfway through. This slot often kind of like runs at like a weird time for time zones. So if you joined us halfway through, I definitely recommend watching the recording back about 20 minutes or so from when you joined to catch kind of like the start of our Graphback demo. So what have we got next? We've got one more show today, which is our last show of the day. That is with John Britton. He's going to be the host this afternoon. John Britton's our founder. So if you've got any questions about Raise.dev, that's the one to show up for as well. So I will not be on camera today. You get a break from me shouting at you, but you've got someone else to shout at you instead. So that's wonderful. And John is going to be with Chris Hunt. Chris is a developer in Colorado, and we're going to be doing another episode of what we call Git Blame, where we dive into some very old code and talk about how we would write that differently today, what has changed. We did one of these with Flaky the other day, where we jumped into an 8-year-old Firefox OS app and spoke about like how JavaScript has changed since then, and how a lot of that code is now like a lot of the libraries that we were looking at are now like standards and that kind of thing. I imagine that's going to be a very similar case with the Ruby on Rails app that we're looking at today. I checked the repo that Chris sent me, and the Ruby on Rails app that we're looking at tonight is a solid 10 years old and hasn't been touched in 10 years. So that's going to be super cool. Both John and Chris are big into Rails. They both worked at massive Ruby companies. I believe they both went to GitHub. I know John went to GitHub. I believe Chris is also from GitHub. So that's going to be super fun. And that is tonight at 10 p.m. European time, 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So we will see you then. In terms of next week, I'll give you some spoilers for next week. It's going to be an exciting week next week. So this schedule will be up on the Twitch. The schedule for next week will be up on the Twitch over the weekend. But for now, I can give you some spoilers. We have on Monday, so I mentioned then that we have some folks from Fastify coming on. So on Monday, we've got Ethan coming on. Ethan is an engineer at Microsoft, but is also a maintainer of Fastify. So I'm hoping he'll talk to us a little bit about that. Tuesday is an exciting day. Tuesday is our Dev2 takeover day, when the wonderful folks from Dev2, the developer community, the blog, they take over the show and they work on Dev2, and they work on Forum, the open source software that powers Dev2, and they just live code on the platform right here on the show for you. I believe next week Nick is bringing someone on to talk about not accessibility, that was last week, to talk about design. So it's design show this week. That's always super fun. Wednesday is what I'm calling the accidental Twilio day, because we have Layla Porter from Twilio in the morning and Lizzie Siegel from Twilio in the evening. And in between, it will be Wilhelm Klopp. We're going to be hanging out with Wilhelm again. He's been on the show before, telling us about his kind of like journey to building an independent software business, but we'll do something a bit different next week. On Thursday, we've got Gregor Martinus, who is all over the JavaScript ecosystem, maintains some really cool projects. And then Friday, we've got Frida, who is a Raised Dev alum, and we're going to be talking about their developer journey. So some great shows lined up next week. That wasn't all of them. I've just given you a highlight from every day. The full schedule will be up over the weekend. So all that's left for me to say is if you have any questions or anything we can help you with this Hacktoberfest, we are here 3 times a day for the rest of Hacktoberfest. You can submit your questions to this URL. And if you want to level up your developer career and don't know where to start, or you're looking for someone to help you achieve your goals, you can sign up to raise.dev to get help from our expert coaches who will help you level up, help you get the experience you need to reach the next step of your career. I will say, if you sign up for raise.dev, that we do have a bit of a wait list at the moment because we are matching people with coaches as fast as we can, but we only have so many coaches and only so many hours in the day. If you get the wait list message, that is a genuine wait list. This isn't any of that like, oh, beta app, we only let 1,000 people in at a time, you're not getting in until we go public or whatever. This is we have a queue of people that we're trying to match with coaches as fast as we can, and we're doing that as fast as we can, but it might just take a little while. So that isn't a go away, you haven't gotten in message. That is a genuine, we will get to you when we can message. So do not worry about that. I have had some people message me saying like, oh, I missed the opportunity, blah, blah, blah. You haven't at all. It's just we're trying to get through the queue. So the only other thing to say, if you enjoyed the show, you can help us out by giving us a follow. The other thing with that is you can get notifications when we go live. So hit the little heart, and then there's a little bell that pops up. That'll get you notifications. That'll give you a notification whenever we go live. And also we're on Twitter at RaiseDevs, which I'll put on the screen for you. We're on everywhere as RaiseDevs, so you can follow along and get notifications of when we're doing these wonderful shows. Okay, that's everything from me. If you join us for the late show later, I will see you briefly then before I hand over to John. And if you don't join us later, I hope you join us sometime before the end of October. And we'll see you whenever that happens. Have a wonderful rest of your day.